it's hard to verify every single piece of information we see, especially on a platform like TikTok where people are often telling stories. It's almost like they're speaking to you face to face. It's easier to maybe believe whatever information is presented.
I'm Sean Lyons, and welcome to Civic School. This is our limited series where we try to answer your questions about Canadian government, about Canadian politics, really to give you the tools you need to arm yourselves to exercise your rights as a Canadian citizen. Now, if you've been watching, you know generally we do try to actually answer your questions, to break things down, the nuts and bolts of how the system operates. This time around, though, with an election right around the corner, we wanted to do things a little differently. Instead of talking about how the system works, today we wanted to talk about some of the people out there, the players, even the bots, that are trying to break the system. We are talking about mis- and disinformation in the political system. I'm joined here by one of the journalists with Radio-Canada's myth-busting program Les Décrypteurs. Nicholas DeRosa is with me. Nicholas, thanks so much.
It's a pleasure.
What are you seeing this time around this election?
Well, we've started seeing those posts about voting with a pencil these past few days on X Twitter. They're not getting a ton of engagement, but the last few elections, whether it's provincial or federal, we've seen similar posts like that saying that you must vote with a pen if you want your vote to count, sowing mistrust in the election process. Obviously, Election Canada says that you can vote with either a pen or pencil. There's no problem. We've seen people saying that they've been forced to use a pencil at the voting booth. Obviously, this information is unverified. It's hard to verify. And I guess that's kind of the point. Whether it's to mobilize people to go vote by any means necessary or if it's just to sow some kind of distrust, we've been seeing that. Otherwise, I'd say misinformation, disinformation-wise, it's been a pretty calm election. There haven't been any major incidents of fake news or of stories that might try to sway the vote one way or the other. Obviously, it's the first Canadian election in the age of generative AI, generative artificial intelligence. But that hasn't necessarily been used to misinform or disinform people. It's mostly been more of a way of making caricatures, in a sense. Earlier on in the election cycle, we saw several AI-generated images, quite obviously AI-generated images, of Liberal leader Mark Carney with Jeffrey Epstein, a very well-known sex trafficker, which, you know, as I said, they were obviously fake images, but there was a real image of Mark Carney from several years ago with Ghislaine Maxwell, who was Jeffrey Epstein's associate, that started surfacing online. The Liberal Party denied that they had any sort of special relationship. They were only together for a few minutes several years ago when Mr. Carney was at the Bank of England. But regardless, those AI images are used to send a message, to sow some doubt, maybe to ask questions about potential links Liberal leader has with Mr. Epstein. There is no proof whatsoever they have some kind of relationship or that he's on any kind of list. But we saw a lot of posts like that.
Really interesting. You know, you bring up a good point. We talk about this, and we've been talking about this for a while now, the AI deepfakes, all the technology that exists out there that continues to develop. One would almost think with an election in the offing and underway that you would see more malicious use of that kind of technology. From your point of view, of someone who looks at myths, who looks at disinformation, that sort of thing, how surprised are you that we're not seeing more of that in an election campaign like this one?
Not very surprised, honestly. I think the U.S. election was a good test for that. And even in the U.S. election, there were very few attempts to actually mislead people with AI. We saw the same kind of use where it was kind of used as a means of parody, as a means of caricature. And since we often follow trends in the United States, I'm not really surprised that there hasn't been more widespread use of AI for that. There's been a lot of fears throughout the years that, you know, we might get inundated with deepfakes. So far, that hasn't happened anywhere, really. So I'm not surprised that it's also the case here.
All right, let's talk then about disinformation, if it's not always as overt. So what have we been seeing? What are we seeing during this election campaign that could be qualified, classified in some way as mis or disinformation?
What we've been seeing a lot on meta platforms are fake articles that use the image of Mark Carney or Pierre Poilievre to make people invest into cryptocurrency scams. And these scams have been around for months, if not years. They've been on everybody's social media feeds. But with this election specifically, these articles are everywhere. The McGill's Media Ecosystem Observatory runs weekly polling on different phenomena with misinformation and disinformation. And it was 25% of respondents that said they had seen articles that were using real news sources' look and design to get people fished into scams, finally. And those articles also seem to be presenting some information in them. Like they're going to say that Mark Carney announced a new measure or that Mark Carney destroyed Pierre Poilievre in the debate, something like that. So that information may be misleading, but it's not necessarily a widespread mis or disinformation incident. Otherwise, I think it's mostly hyper-partisan content that we're seeing. So in this case, we're not necessarily talking about, overt dis or misinformation, but content that has a very partisan point of view that may be masquerading as information, as legitimate news source, and that type of content obviously is flourishing on Meta platforms since news organizations are banned, but also on all types of other platforms, whether it be TikTok or YouTube. Hyperpartisan content has been pretty widespread as well.
That's a good point. I think we have to talk about the meta-ness of it all, all the platforms that are out there, and the removal, as you mentioned, of news sites from Meta, from Facebook, because of the dispute with the Canadian government. Overall, I mean, in an election campaign, of course, we see it, but overall, what impact has that had on people's, their news consumption, their information consumption, the kind of things that are being fed into their households and into their information sphere?
It's very hard to evaluate it. But one thing's for sure, I know that a lot of news organizations said that their traffic has remained relatively stable since this news ban, which I guess is a good thing. But we can't discount the fact that even if somebody wasn't clicking on the articles, they would see the articles, they would see the headlines, they'd probably have a better idea of what is going on in the news, even if they're not necessarily reading the articles, and all that has just disappeared from Meta platforms. Again, McGill's Media Ecosystem Observatory said that Instagram and Facebook were two of the three most popular platforms for news today, even though news organizations are banned from those platforms. So people obviously are getting maybe less information on those platforms. Are they going towards YouTube? Are they going towards other platforms instead? That's a possibility. We've seen news organizations also invest massively in TikTok, whether it be CBC, Radio Canada, all kinds of newspapers as well are making TikTok videos too. So has that kind of replaced Meta? It's a question that can be asked. So it's very hard to evaluate on like a macro level, but one thing's for sure, traffic to news sites hasn't necessarily been affected from what we know.
You're with Les Décrypteurs. Yep. You're pretty well-known fact checkers. You're pretty good at it. But out there in the world, how well are we equipped, do you think, as a society, as individuals, to be able to do that kind of fact-checking on our own when you read articles, when you see something you're not sure of? You think people are, not do you think, but from what you've seen, are people well enough informed about how to know, to discern the fact from the fiction?
Well, I think when you see people pushing hyper-partisan content, for example, you'll often see them referring to trusted news organizations to bolster their arguments. So I think even if there is more and more distrust towards the media, they are generally seen as a source for people in the end. When they're looking for information, they will turn to trusted media to check information to make sure something is true. But I do think that in an environment where we're presented with so much information, it's hard to verify every single piece of information we see, especially on a platform like TikTok where people are often telling stories. It's almost like they're speaking to you face to face. It's easier to maybe believe whatever information is presented. So I think it's just that mass information, that deluge of information that we're exposed to day after day that makes it hard to take a step back and go verify the information. But it is sometimes simple to do, to maybe just go verify a news source, go towards trusted media and look for it. But what's also hard is that sometimes we just don't know. We just don't know if information is true or false. And it's hard even as a fact checker to write an article where you say, we don't know. And when there's an information void, it's often filled with false information. So that's another phenomenon that we're unfortunately seeing.
As we head toward Election Day, people have to make their decisions. They've got to use whatever resources they have, find the information that they need. What tips and tricks would you, as someone in the business, give to the general public out there when they are trying to decide how best to make their decision, to make sure that what they're reading, what they're absorbing is true and helpful when it comes to casting that vote?
Well, the news media isn't perfect. We can make mistakes, but when we do make mistakes, we correct them, we mention it. So obviously going to trusted media sources is always a good idea. Elections Canada has several resources on their website explaining how to vote, different questions that people may have, so they can go there as well.
Nicholas DeRosa, thanks so much for being with me. I appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Don't forget, you don't need to be a professional fact checker to make sure you are armed with all the right information come voting day, especially when it comes to the nuts and bolts of casting your ballot, as Nicholas was saying. Check out Elections Canada, their website. You can call them as well. The most important thing, make sure your ballot is cast and your voice is heard on Election Day. This is Civic School. Class dismissed.